This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Hey everyone, I'm your host, Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on a show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the Conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. You could also always email me at peter@historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, in the blistering heat of the summer of 1932, tens of thousands of veterans marched on the capital of the United States. Not in celebration, not in triumph, but in desperation. They came not with rifles, but with resolve, and not to conquer, but really to be heard. Clad in tattered uniforms and World War I campaign ribbons, many carried children on their backs and flags in their hands. These were the men of the Bonus Army, former doughboys and laborers who had once braved the trenches of Europe and now faced the unforgiving trenches of the Great Depression. Their fight was not in the fields of France this time, but in the streets of Washington, D.C., where the government they had once served now barricaded itself against them. What unfolded in the shadow of the Capitol Dome would be one of the most shameful chapters in American history, a military assault on veterans by their own government. Ordered by the president, executed by a future general, and etched into the nation's conscience with fire and tear gas. Here is the rest of that unfortunate story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The story of the Bonus Army, or also known as the Battle of Washington D.C., begins with a promise. In 1924, Congress passed the World War Adjusted Compensation Act, offering veterans of the Great War a bonus for their service. But the catch was cruel. The bulk of the payment would not be issued until 1945, 2 full decades after the war's end. Many veterans accepted the deal in better economic times. But when the Great Depression struck, that delayed bonus became a cruel joke. By 1932, with unemployment hovering around 25%, families starving, and homes lost to foreclosure, that distant payment felt like a lifetime held out of reach. So, the veterans organized. Word spread like wildfire through relief lines and unemployment offices. Go to Washington, demand your bonus now. What began as a trickle soon became a torrent. By early June, more than 15,000 veterans, along with their wives, children, and supporters, had arrived in the nation's capital. They came from every corner of the country: hobo jungles in the Midwest, shuttered coal towns in Pennsylvania, tenement streets in New York. They arrived by boxcar, on foot, and in rattling jalopies, held together with rope. They call themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force, or the BEF, a nod to the American Expeditionary Force of 1917. Under the rough but disciplined leadership of former cannery worker and vet Walter W. Waters, they erected a sprawling shanty town on the muddy flats of Anacostia River, across from the capital. They built shelters out of scrap wood, tar paper, canvas, and rusted metal. It was a city unto itself, with its own sanitation system, schools, and even newspapers. The veterans stood in orderly lines, saluted the flag every morning, and held peaceful marches down Pennsylvania Avenue. They believed in democracy, and they believed that Congress would not ignore them. But President Herbert Hoover was not so sure. To the embattled president, already loathed for his ineffectual response to the Depression, the Bonus Army was a dangerous symbol, an unruly mob that might ignite a populist uprising. And he was not alone. Army Chief of Staff General Douglas MacArthur viewed the encampments as a direct threat to national security. MacArthur, ever the soldier, convinced himself the Bonus Army was riddled with communists and revolutionaries. A fifth column, so to speak, cloaked in veteran garb. Inside Congress, the debate raged. Should the payout be moved up and paid out right now, or should it wait to the original 1945? Supporters of immediate payment, including Representative Wright Patman of Texas, introduced a bill to issue the bonus early. The House passed it narrowly, but in the Senate, the proposal was crushed 62-18. When the news reached the Bonus Army on June 17th, the shantytown fell into stunned silence. Congress had abandoned them. Ultimately, all they really wanted, and the reason they came to Washington, was to ask to move up that payment. And now, those dreams were gone. Some wept. Others simply stared into the firelight, unwilling to believe that the nation they had defended in war had turned so cold. They did not riot. Despite provocations, the Bonus Army remained peaceful. Many chose to stay, believing change would eventually come. Others had no homes to return to in the first place, so might as well stay in D.C. Hoover, however, had made up his mind. The veterans had to go. On July 28, 1932, police tried to evict a small group of Bonus Army members occupying an abandoned federal building downtown. A confrontation broke out, and shots were fired. 2 veterans were killed. News spread quickly, and tensions flared. That afternoon, Hoover gave the order. The U.S. military was to forcibly remove the Bonus Army from Washington, D.C. Initially, and ironically, it was the police of Washington, D.C. that was responsible for the removal. But once the police chief went to speak to their president and told him he could not handle the situation himself, Hoover had no choice but to call in the military. General MacArthur, dressed in full military regalia, took command personally, against direct orders from Hoover to remain at headquarters, I should mention. With him was a young and eager aide, Major Dwight D. Eisenhower, and a cavalry commander, Major George S. Patton. Together, they brought tanks, tear gas, fixed bayonets, and more than 1,000 soldiers from the 12th Infantry and 3rd Cavalry, supported by mounted troopers and 6 tanks. These were not volunteers. They were regular U.S. Army units, trained for war, and now deployed against American veterans. The assault began near Pennsylvania Avenue, where troops swept through the streets, bayonets fixed, pushing back stunned veterans and their families. Crowds screamed. Soldiers shouted commands. Tear gas canisters flung through the air, exploding in white clouds that stung eyes and choked lungs. Mothers carrying infants staggered from the haze. A child was even trampled in the chaos. As the veterans fell back, MacArthur's men pursued them. Hoover sent word, "Do not cross the river." MacArthur ignored that order. He believed a revolution was underway and was determined to crush it. Ironic, when another president once told him to not get too close to the Chinese border in Korea. We're talking 20-something years later. And at that time, well, MacArthur also ignored the orders. Anyway, back to this event. That night, under the stars and the flickering glow of burning shelters, the military raised the Bonus Army encampment. Soldiers set the shanties ablaze one by one. Their flames rising into the humid summer sky, smoke curled over the Potomac as the entire community was reduced to ash. By morning, 55 veterans were injured and over 130 arrested, and countless more left with nothing. The Capitol stood quiet, eerily so, as the sun rose over a battlefield that no one wanted to acknowledge. Public outrage was swift. Newspapers across the country condemned the action. Photos of veterans fleeing in terror, bayonets at their backs, spread like wildfire. The New York Times called it a pitiful spectacle. Cartoonists drew the image of a bayonet Uncle Sam. Even Hoover's allies winced at the optics. The Battle of Washington, as some dubbed it, marked a turning point. Hoover, already unpopular, was now politically doomed. That November, he would lose in a landslide to Franklin D. Roosevelt. Yet even Roosevelt did not support the early payment of the bonus. When another march arrived in 1933, this one a little less known in history, he sent Eleanor Roosevelt instead of troops. She walked through the tents, listened to the men, and shared coffee. "At least she treated us like human beings," one veteran said. That small gesture went a long way. Well, it wasn't until 1936, under mounting political pressure, that Congress finally passed the bonus bill, over Roosevelt's veto, I should say. Veterans at last received the compensation that they had been promised over a decade earlier. But the scars of 1932 remained. The Bonus Army incident became a cautionary tale in American memory, a reminder of how easily desperation can be met with repression and how fragile the promise of democracy becomes when the state fears its own people. It also exposed the tension between citizen and government, between those who serve and those who command. Douglas MacArthur would go on to greater fame, as would Eisenhower and Patton, but their first battlefield together was not in Normandy or North Africa. It was in Washington, D.C., and their enemy wore the same uniform that they did, just older, thinner, and forgotten. Thanks for listening. This week on the Conversation Series, Dr. Moody Al-Rashid, a distinguished historian and author whose work takes us back to the very foundations of human civilization.
So the story kind of begins with a woman called Enigaldi Nana. It's the only name we know her by, which is the name she was given when she was consecrated as the high priestess to the moon god in Ur by her father, who was the last independent Babylonian king, Nabonidus. And when excavators found her palace, they discovered on the kind of top layer of excavation a weird collection of artifacts that are from much earlier eras. Some of them, almost 2,000 years early. They found a votive object, so an object with a dedication to a god from around 1800 BCE. They found just such a bizarre collection of things that were out of times. And it was this weirdly shaped cuneiform tablets. And on it talks about the discovery of a brick by a governor of Ur. And the governor took the brick that he found and put it in the palace for display. And so early excavators thought, oh my goodness, we have found the world's first museum.